One of the only positives from not having had any gigs for the past year due to COVID is that I've been able to do tons of Zoom teaching, which has been a great way for me to meet people from all over the world and talk to them about how music relates to this instrument, the bass guitar. Now, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, I seem to attract a lot of what I would call bass refugees, people that have been playing for a number of years, and they can all play, often really well, but they lack any labels for what they're actually playing on the instrument, and they don't have a logical way of navigating harmony. They've often been studying with other teachers of varying levels of fame and fortune and notoriety, and they might also have been members of various online bass schools, mentioning their names, but for whatever reason they can't seem to connect the dots and get past the obstacles that are holding them back from playing the music that they're really most passionate about. So what I tend to do is go back to basics, and what that often throws up is fundamental gaps in their knowledge of the primary elements of music. The first place that manifests itself is triads. Now, if you've ever watched any of my other videos, chances are you will have discovered that I'm fairly fanatical about triads, because triads are really the building blocks of modern harmony, and people often get really upset about more advanced things like 7th chords, 9th, 11th, 13th, whatever, extensions, and modes and other chord scales. And that's often because they haven't spent enough time working on the fundamentals, the basics, the nuts and bolts of music. And we're going to start with triads. So we're going to take 5 different types of triads that you ought to know, and we're going to learn how to play them in more than one way. And we'll discover why that's important in a minute. So 4 of these triads exist naturally within the major scale, and the 5th one occurs naturally within both the harmonic minor and melodic minor scales, which are important things to know about if you want to get into growing up harmony. So if I ask students about different types of triads, chances are the first thing they'll mention is major triads. If I play it on a single string, let's play G major on the G string, so G, B and D. So we've got G the root note, B the major third, D the perfect fifth. Now playing it on a single string is a very good way to visualize that harmony and really get a sense of the sizes of those intervals within the triad. So G to B is a major third, 4 frets, 4 semitones, 4 half steps, whatever you want to call it. That's that sound and that's that distance. And then from B to D, the third to the fifth, that's only 3 frets, 3 semitones, 3 half steps, which is a minor third. So that triad is really, any major triad is really a major third with a minor third on top of it. And we'll see that all the triads we're going to look at are just combinations of different thirds, different pairs of thirds. So that is a really good way to visualize the harmony, but it's not a very practical way of playing it. So what we're going to do is look at different ways to play that triad across the strings. So the most common way to play a major triad: middle finger, first finger, little finger. And chances are most people watching this video will have played that millions of times, which is great, very useful, but it's not always the best way of playing things. We need to also have what I would call a secondary fingering. So we've got a primary fingering for that triad, which is beginning with finger 2, so we're starting with that half of the hand. It's really useful to have a secondary fingering which starts with the other half of the hand, so either with finger 3 or finger 4, and that means you can get yourself out of trouble. Quite a lot of the time, if you're playing and you're improvising, I don't necessarily mean ripping a solo, but you know, just any situation where you have some artistic license to be creative with your bass playing when playing a bass line, and you have choices. If you have too many choices and no systems to deal with those choices, it's going to lead to mistakes. And the most common thing that happens is people will be making stuff up on the spot, and then they find that they need to get to a different chord and they only know one way of playing that chord, so they have to cut a note short and jump to a different place on the neck because they don't know where those chord tones are in that part of the bass. So, alternative fingering for a major triad, starting on finger 4. If I begin from G on the A string at the 10th fret, I can get G, B and D, but my hand is going that way. It's like a backwards version of playing a major triad. So what I would do is connect those two things. So I'm practicing the triad in 2 octaves using 2 different fingerings. And you'll notice that I've got a big shift here up the A string. And the reason I'm doing that is to make life more difficult for myself. If I can make that shift sound as connected as possible and disguise the break between those 2 notes, I'm doing a pretty good job. So, 2 workable fingerings for a major triad. There is another way to play it. You can play the major third on a single string, but it only really works in a higher octave. If I take that second octave, G, B and D, but I start with my first finger, you can get a major third on one string and then grab the 5th with your middle finger. So really that's a third fingering that you could use. For me, I don't often use that. It doesn't have that many practical applications unless I'm fairly high up the neck. You might find that it's more useful for you. There you go, you can try it out. After major triads, the next common chord type is minor. And again, if we do things in parallel, so from the same root note, we're going to have G minor. So G major was G, B and D. To find a minor triad, we need a minor third and a perfect 5th. So minor third of G is B flat, so it's going to be G, B flat and D, again on a single string. And you can see that there, we've got a minor third, 3 semitones, 3 frets, and then the distance between the B flat, the minor third, and the D, the perfect 5th, is now 4 semitones, major third. So the major triad was a major third with a minor third on top of it. In a minor triad, we flip those things around. We've got a minor third and then a major third on top. Again, triads are just pairs of different thirds. So, again, that's good for visualizing that, but it's not that great in a practical playing scenario. So, minor things often begin on the first finger because you don't want to do a minor third between 2 fingers on adjacent strings. That's really horrible. You can see that my wrist's now at a really horrible angle. So I'm going to start and play that minor third on one string. I'm also pivoting a lot with my thumb as I play because I don't want my hand to be under too much tension unless it's completely necessary. So you'll see, if you watch my wrist and my elbow, my thumb is doing a lot of work whenever I play, helping my hand move around the fretboard and not carry any tension unnecessarily, because if your hand is tense then your playing will sound tense. So root, flat 3, 5, grabbing that perfect 5th with the third finger, and then again that was my primary fingering starting from that half of the hand. I need something starting from the other half of the hand. I'm going to take that sort of backwards way of playing a major triad and just flatten the third. So now instead of playing a B with my third finger, I'm going to play B flat with my middle finger. So you've got a minor triad across 3 strings starting from the little finger. If I put those 2 things together, the third triad type that we encounter naturally in the major scale is the diminished triad. Now, this is a fairly angular sound, fairly dissonant, but it's an important thing because it crops up all the time in a variety of different musical styles. So, we've had triads with a major and a minor third in there. Diminished triad is a symmetrical structure that has 2 minor thirds on top of each other. So again, in parallel from G, G, B flat, and then up a minor third from a B flat is going to be D flat. And again, if you play it on one string, it's much, much easier to visualize the fact that that's 2 minor thirds, 2 sets of 3 semitones on top of each other. Now in terms of practical fingerings for diminished, it's sort of the odd one out in the set because the primary fingering starts much like a minor triad. It's really a minor triad with a flat 5. So I'm going to play my minor third on one string, G to B flat, and then my middle finger is going to grab the flat 5, the D flat. In the second octave, I could start with my little finger and spread minor thirds like this, G, B flat, and then grab the flat 5 on the G string. But that's pretty stressful for my hands, even though I can manage the stretch just about and I don't have to hold those notes down once I'm done with them. Even with a lot of thumb pivoting, it's still not that comfortable. So what I'm going to do is reorganize that on 2 strings. I'm going to lead with my third finger, and the diminished triad is going to be one of the few situations where I lead with my third finger. So here, G, B flat, and then D flat with the little finger. So if I put those 2 things together, the fourth type of triad that can be generated naturally from the major scale is the suspended or sus4 triad. Now in a sus chord, the third is replaced with another interval which creates a suspension or a floating sort of sound. And if you listen to sus chords, sus4 and sus2, you'll hear that they're really common, especially on guitars. It's a very guitaristic thing to do with open chords, substituting in open strings to create that sort of floating sus feel. It feels unresolved. So in this, we're replacing the third with a fourth, with a perfect fourth. And the word perfect means that it's harmonically neutral. It works with both major and minor chords. So in G, again in parallel, G is the root, C is the perfect fourth, 5 semitones, 5 half steps, and then D is still the perfect fifth. So here we've got a fourth and then a major second instead of 2 pairs of thirds. This is one of the only triads where we're not using pairs of thirds stacked up. That's how it sounds. Now, in terms of practical fingerings on the bass, we're going to have to use our first finger to play both the root and the fourth. Now what I'm doing on the way up is I'm rolling with my finger. So I'm using my fingertip on the G, I'm flattening my finger out and hitting the C with sort of the middle of the first joint of my finger, and then little finger grabs the D. On the way back down, I'm going to jump. I'm fretting that C as I normally would, and then I'm just going to jump down to that G. And that's a challenge to make that note sound connected, so that's something that's worth practicing. In the second octave, again, because this sits slightly outside of the normal triadic realm, we're going to play the secondary fingering using our third finger. So I've got G under my third finger, little finger tucks in to play the C, and then the first finger can grab the fifth. So that's a sus4 triad across 3 strings. If I put those 2 things together, last but not least in our exploration of triads is the augmented triad, which doesn't occur naturally in the major scale, but if you harmonise either a melodic minor or a harmonic minor scale, you'll find augmented triads in there. And an augmented triad is a pair of major thirds on top of each other. So on a single string, so there, because we've got 2 major thirds, the fifth, rather than being perfect, is now augmented. It's been made bigger. That's what that word really means. Augmented fifth, a sharp 5, is 8 frets, 8 semitones rather than 7. Now, in terms of ways of playing this practically on the bass, it's really important that your thumb is active in the music. It's really important. It's not just asleep at the back of the neck, or worst of all, asleep over the top of the neck, because that will really limit your lateral movement and it will put tons of tension in your fretting hand, which is no good for anyone. So, primary fingering, again, treat it like a major triad, but with a sharp 5, because that's what it is. Again, tons of pivoting with the thumb to make those notes sound connected. Again, you could do it on 1 string, but that's not particularly practical for me. And then up an octave, you've got a couple of choices. For me, I would play it with 4th, 2nd and 1st. You could do 3, 2 and 1, but that doesn't really feel very secure for my fingers. A lot of my playing is based on the Simandl upright concept of using 1, 2 and 4. 3 is usually in a supportive capacity, so anytime I'm leading with my third finger, it kind of makes my hand feel a little bit weird. So augmented triad, 2 octaves, 2 different fingerings. So that might seem like a really fundamental thing, but it's hugely important to be able to do that. First of all, play all those 5 types of triad in parallel, so starting from the same root. It doesn't have to be in the key of G, but in any key. Let's just do it in B, for example. So when you're working on this, it's really important that you spell out both the intervals in those triads and the constituent pitches in there. So if we do it in B very quickly, B major, root, major third, perfect fifth. That's going to be B, D sharp, F sharp. Primary fingering, starting on finger 2. Secondary fingering, starting on finger 4. B minor, root, flat 3, perfect fifth. B, D, F sharp. B diminished, root, flat 3, flat 5. B, D, F natural. B sus 4, root, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. B, E, F sharp. Last but not least, B augmented, root, major third, augmented fifth, sharp 5. B, D sharp, F double sharp. So in that scenario, you might say, hang on, why is it not a G natural? Well, it's a fifth. Any sort of B from an F is a fifth, and then the augmented fifth is going to be F double sharp, which is a bit of a brain ache. So what you want to do with those is practice them in parallel from the same root note until you're really confident with both the intervallic structures of each type of triad and the names of the pitches that go into those. Play those then from as many root notes as you can, again in parallel. That helps to really get you confident and secure with the differences in the structures and pitches of those different types of triads. Then when you're happy with things in parallel, in the context of most songs, you're not playing parallel harmony, you're playing derivative harmony, things derived from one scale. And if you harmonise a major scale, you get the following arrangement of triads. 1, 4 and 5 are major, 2, 3 and 6 are minor, 7 is diminished. And what you can do then is take a key centre, let's do it in good old G major, and just work up the E string, playing each triad in 2 octaves. And again, say the name of the triad, and say the pitch is in there. So we can actually start on E minor, can't we? E minor, E, G, B. F sharp diminished, F sharp, A, C. G major, G, B, D. A minor, A, C, E. B minor, B, D, F sharp. C major, C, E, G. D major, D, F sharp, A. E minor again. I can get probably F sharp diminished again. Then I'm out of frets, I then work my way back down again. Now, if you find that you can't spell out those chord types with that level of immediacy, it means you've still got work to do. That's a really, really important thing. Absolutely essential, actually, not just really important. What you also find is when you start changing keys, you're not learning 7 new chords every time. You'll find a lot of these triads crop up in different keys, which reduces your workload a little bit. So there you go. It's worth investing a lot of time becoming a master of triads, and it will help you navigate more complex harmony with greater ease. Best of luck.